Today we begin a series called Adolescent Trauma Case Studies. This is not about sensationalism or shock. It's about understanding how trauma, attachment, context, and development can intersect in deeply tragic ways. Our first story begins in rural East Texas. Before we begin, I would like to be clear about the purpose of this video. This is an educational case study focused on adolescent trauma, development, and human behavior. It is not meant to sensationalize violence, assign blame, or justify harm. Some details may be difficult to hear, and viewer discretion is advised. My goal here is to understand how trauma, attachment, and development intersect, because understanding is one of the strongest tools we have for prevention. Erin Caffey was 16 years old in 2008, living in a small town in East Texas. She was raised in a deeply religious household. Her father, Terry Caffey, was a youth pastor, and the family was heavily involved in church life and their local community. Erin and her younger brothers were homeschooled for most of their childhood using a faith-based curriculum. This meant her early development took place largely within the family system and church environment, rather than in a traditional peer-based school setting. From a psychological perspective, early development matters because it shapes how a child learns to regulate emotions, handle conflict, and understand authority. It doesn't determine outcomes, but it establishes the emotional tools available later. People who knew Erin described her as creative, expressive, and musically talented. She sang in church and was often described as warm and engaged. There were no early indication of violence or cruelty. Now, adolescence is already a period of identity instability. And when you add major transitions, the emotional load increases significantly. Now, in Erin's case, one of the most significant shifts was her transition from being homeschooled to going to public school. This change happened during a very critical developmental window when teens are forming identity, testing autonomy, and seeking belonging outside the family. Public school introduced new social dynamics, peer exposure, and romantic possibility for Erin all at once. For someone who had spent most of their life in a structured, familiar environment, this was a major adjustment. Transitions like this don't cause harm on their own, but they often reveal gaps in coping, regulation, and support. Around this time, Erin began working at a Sonic restaurant where she met 18-year-old Charlie Wilkinson. Their relationship developed quickly and intensely. Developmentally, adolescent romantic attachment can feel consuming, especially when it becomes the primary source of validation, identity, and emotional safety. As Erin's attachment to Charlie deepened, tension with her parents increased. Her parents became concerned after noticing changes in her behavior and discovering content on Charlie's MySpace page that conflicted with their values. They attempted to set boundaries, restricting contact between Erin and Charlie. From an adult perspective, this may look like reasonable parenting, but from an adolescent perspective, especially one with intense attachment, it can feel like a threat to identity and belonging. This is where developmental psychology becomes critical. Adolescents do not have fully developed executive functioning. This affects impulse control, long-term consequence evaluation, and emotional regulation. When emotions are intense, reasoning becomes narrow. Developmental incompetence does not mean a lack of intelligence or morality. It means the brain systems responsible for foresight and regulation are still under construction. In Erin's case, there is evidence of all or nothing thinking. The belief that removing obstacles was the only way to preserve her attachment. This does not excuse behavior. It explains how irreversible choices can feel temporary or necessary in the adolescent mind. On March 1st, 2008, Charlie Wilkinson and another teen entered the Caffey home while Erin waited outside. Her mother and 2 younger brothers were killed. Her father survived despite serious injuries. 4 teenagers were ultimately involved. Erin's role included leaving the door unlocked and remaining in contact by phone. I'm intentionally keeping this section brief because the focus here is not the violence, but the context. All 4 teenagers involved were arrested and pleaded guilty. Erin accepted a plea deal and received life sentences with the possibility of parole. Others received life without parole. Her father spoke publicly asking that the death penalty not be pursued. He expressed a belief in accountability alongside the possibility of remorse and growth. When we step back and apply a trauma-informed developmental lens, several patterns emerge. We see a teenager navigating identity formation during a major transition with narrowing attachment, limited emotional regulation, and escalating conflict without adequate intervention. This case is not about money, gain, or material reward. It appears driven by emotional fixation and perceived loss of autonomy. Understanding this does not lessen the harm done. It helps us recognize warning signs earlier. Cases like this force us to ask difficult questions. How do we support adolescents through major transitions? How do we address intense attachment before it becomes isolating? How do systems, family, school, community, intervene without escalating conflict? Adolescent trauma work is not about predicting violence. It's about reducing isolation, improving emotional literacy, and creating safety before desperation sets in. Thank you for sitting with this case thoughtfully. This series exists to promote understanding, not judgment. And if you're working with adolescents as a parent, educator, or clinician, I hope this encourages deeper conversation and earlier support. I'll see you in the next case study.